end on time. That's my rule. So every year, since I've been here, last 5 years, we do a survey preparation in service. It is, it's not required by regulation, but I feel like, good, we got one more straggler.
Cindy's coming too.
Cindy. I feel like that if we do not if I do not do my very best to, at a minimum, prep everyone for what's going to happen when the state surveyors arrive at our building for their required annual in-service, then shame on me. Because I don't care if you've been here 30 years or you've been here 30 days. Every year, there's a new group of surveyors. About every other year, the federal government changes what they're going to survey on. And so, shame on us if we don't feel like the entire team is prepared and ready to go for this survey. The other reason why it's really important for us to all know is because it goes out on the World Wide Web. And then everybody gets to compare that 1 week when those surveyors are here for all 365 days of the remainder of the year. Boy, that Lancaster, look at them, they rock it out. They only got 5 deficiencies. Or, ooh, look at that Lancaster, they got 25 deficiencies. So, why is it important? You know, we're not going to pretend that it's Disneyland while they're here. We're not going to double our staff, and we're not going to, you know, all of a sudden be serving filet mignon. We're not doing any of that. But we are going to prep ourselves so that when they're here, everybody's helping everybody be successful through it. Make sense? So, just a little bit about the survey. Surveys are unannounced. If you have worked in any other kind of healthcare setting, you may be like JCO. They always announce their surveys. They tell the hospitals when they're coming so the hospitals can get everything ready for them. Wouldn't that be great? Well, in the 1960s, when elders weren't taken care of very well, the federal government decided we can't give those horrible nursing homes any time to prepare for this. They might fool us. So we have to surprise attack them. So they come in on drones and they swoop in and then they catch us, taking really good care of residents. So, but they are unannounced, and that's why they're unannounced, because they don't want us to behave any differently than when they're not here. They have to be scheduled between the 9th and the 15th month of the previous survey. So we are in our survey window. They could have come anytime starting in September through March of 2020. The Lincoln survey teams are actually behind with their surveys, and so they are even actually extending past 15 months. So we're doing this survey because last year they came on December 4th, and so we were doing this, you know, in November, because if they show up in December, 12 months, which is generally what they do, then we feel like we're all prepped and ready to go. When Ashley and I are working on the 2020 in-service calendar, we're going to do another survey. Well, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do a survey prep rally in April. It's going to be a little different than this one because you have already just gotten this one in November. But in April, if they're still not here, then we're going to have a prep rally to get ready for them. And it's going to be totally different with balloons and prizes and everything. But anyway, so we are in window. They can come anytime now that they want. I should back up and tell you that when the state surveyors are here, they are not only, they're doing 2 surveys. They're looking at the state regulations, which are just staffing kinds of things, very minimal, like 12 pages. And then they're going through the 7,500 pages of federal regulations. That's what takes them so long. So they're here representing both the federal government and the state government when they're here. So we call it a state survey, but in reality, actually, it's a federal survey. And the federal government is the one dictating to them everything they need to look at. What the slides you're going to see today are some of the exact same slides that the surveyors get trained on by the federal government. They're available to us, so why not steal them? Let's learn everything they're learning. Let's do everything they're doing. Why not? So when I say this is what they're going to do, I know this is what they're going to do because the federal government has told them they have to do it. So when we know they have to do it, then shame on us for not doing it too. That's the way I look at it. So the federal government tells them they would like them to complete the surveys on consecutive days when possible. Generally, it lasts between 1 and 2 weeks in length. We're the largest skilled nursing facility in the state of Nebraska. We're going to take the longest. In fact, they actually don't even like coming here because we're so large. They can't get done, in 1 week. Our state surveyors work 4 10-hour days. They do not work on Fridays. So they'll arrive anywhere, generally they'll arrive on a Monday through Thursday. 2 years ago, they started here on a Sunday night. And they have to do so many, a certain percentage on evenings, weeks, and holidays. So that checked a box for them to start on a Sunday night here. So they can't do that. The surveyors actually don't like doing it, but they have to do so many. So they are permissible anytime on weekends and nights. And in fact, if they've gotten complaints or anything about night shift, they will for sure start on nights. So here are some of the things they're gonna do before they even walk in our door. They're gonna start our survey before we even know that they're starting our survey. Their offsite preparation, they're gonna download all of our assessments. They have access to all of them that we transmit. And then they're gonna look at our complaint files and abuse reports. This includes all of our self-reports. Anytime a resident has a fall, we have to call it into the state and say this resident fell. Anytime we have a resident-to-resident altercation, which we've had a number of, we have to call that into the state and tell them that this happened and what we're doing about it. When this all started, that we had to do these call-ins, the state didn't really know what bucket to put those in because they have the annual survey bucket, then they had this complaint bucket. So they said, oh, just put all those self-reports in that complaint bucket. So now when they arrive, they'll say, we're here for annual survey and we're here on a complaint. And 15 years ago, that used to get everybody all excited, like, who doesn't like us? Who complained? Oh, it must be. We would sit there and, perseverate on that. Now we know that when they say that, they're actually taking the laundry list of self-reports that we've given them, and they call them complaints. But really what they're gonna do is, and we know that, they're gonna go straight to Station 5 and look to see about all those resident-to-resident altercations. We already know that. Since we already know that, we should be doing something about that. So, all the self-reports, they look at in advance. They're also gonna look at our previous survey results. From the Department of Health and Human Services, we had 5 survey deficiencies last year, and we had 2 as a result of coming for those self-report complaint investigations. In the state of Nebraska, the average number of deficiencies per facility is 8, and on complaint surveys, the average number is 4. While the surveyors are here, the fire marshal is also required to show up and do her annual survey. And so on the life safety code side, we got 9 deficiencies, and the state average with that is 6. So we get double the joy during this period of time. So what were our deficiencies? In 2018, we had everything is relative to an F tag, and they just have all their own different numbers. So like there's at least 812 deficiencies, or 812 regulations, because we got cited on number 812. Last year we got deficiencies for baseline care plans not being completely complete, comprehensive care plans not being updated with the resident's current condition, the prevention of decreases in range of motion. We have to prevent anyone from getting contractures that we can prevent from getting that. Labeling, storing drugs and biologicals. So sometimes what happens, like with inhalers, sometimes insulin pens, things like that. I'm not clinical, but I'm gonna act like it several times today. I just want you to know that. And I get that privilege after being around nurses for 31 years. So sometimes what happens with pharmacy is they label the box that the inhaler comes in, but they don't label the inhaler itself. So then when you use the inhaler, it doesn't have a label on it, and that's what happened with this. And then 812 was store, prepare, serve food. It's a kitchen. It was a sanitary deficiency, but it was a variety of things. Hair nets, hair not being covered, just a lot of different things in the kitchen. So those were our 5 deficiencies. And then we always kind of look at the top 10 deficiencies in the state. Not so much with the Department of Health, because they have so many different survey groups that have all their own little quirks to them, because they're human beings themselves. But with the life safety code, because there's only a couple of fire marshals, we can kind of glean from what they're writing around the state on what we should also be looking at. So we track the top 10 just to kind of see, is there anything new showing up on the radar? And really there is not. Well, there's a few things. Hand washing is still the #1 cited deficiency. It's so easy because medical records can be cited, HR can be cited, nursing can be cited, food can be cited. social service can be cited, everybody can be cited for hand washing. So what do we do in our facility? We wash our hands. Every time we have an empty thought, we wash our hands. Free of accidents, supervision, and devices, those are falls. There's a lot of elders that fall, so there's a lot of self-reports on falls. So again, I think it's pretty easy to cite falls. The food procurement, that's bolded because we did receive that deficiency. It's the third top deficiency cited. Reporting of violations, care plan timings, labeling, storing of drugs and biologicals. This can also be, the reason that that's cited a lot also, other than not being labeled, is outdates. Now we're required to give them the number of carts, med carts we have and where they're located, and they will immediately go upon their arrival and look for outdated meds. Quality of care, the development of comprehensive care plans, a clean, safe, and comfortable home-like environment, and then the notice before we discharge someone. On the life safety code side, we got, like I said, 8 deficiencies. 9. They started up a new set of tags called E-tags. Those are related to our emergency operations plan. So now we have F tags, we have K tags, which are the fire marshal. Now we have these E tags. So under both an E tag and a K tag, we were cited for not testing our generator fuel on a timely basis. That has to be done annually. Blocking of exits, that's the means of egress. The timing of the fire alarms testing. We have to have fire drills at all different times of the month, day, and time. They have to be at least 45 minutes in a 16-month period from any other time. So that's why when we say, especially to the night shift, no, it has to happen at 3:15. You know, they're like, who cares? Well, that's because we'll get cited for it if we don't. Sprinkler system maintenance, there were just some things that on an old log that didn't get addressed. Corridors, doors not latching. So if you ever have a door that doesn't latch when you shut it, fill out a maintenance request order to fix that, because she checks every door in the building. Evacuation and relocation plan, we had to add to our fire plan that you can't cross the path of the fire to rescue residents. You would have to go outside and come in from the outside if they were on that side of the fire. Power cords and extension cords, we did have a resident that had an extension cord. And then cylinder and container storage, we had to add signage so that staff would know on a moment's notice what oxygen oxygen cylinders were full or empty. So we added signage that says full and empty. They're pretty easy to correct. Like I said, on the life safety code side though, the fire marshal, because there's only a couple of them, we can kind of track and trend what she's gonna do when she's here. So we already know, and we've already been cited in most everything. She's looking at the sprinkler systems, the fire drills, corridor doors not being able to shut, hazardous areas, making sure that they lock and shut, electrical systems, panel boxes have to be locked. So those are the kinds of things she's looking at. She's looking for extension cords, oxygen, yeah.
Amy, I've never seen a full or empty side by our tags.
Do you have cylinders? You just have the big one.
Yeah, so the gauge is sufficient,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
But what are you talking about?
Station 4,
The green cylinders.
Station 4
okay.
has all those
Okay.
hospice tanks.
Yes.
And really, we like to blame it on hospice, but it's our license,
Yeah.
so, although on camera I'll blame hospice, it's still our responsibility. So, the other thing they're gonna look at is how do we do year over year? Because if they keep showing up here for the last 3 years, and they keep citing the same thing, then they're gonna say, yeah, you're not really committed to fixing this problem. And so before they even get here, they're gonna look at what they call our CASPER report. CASPER stands for Certification and Survey Provider Enhanced Reports. It's just a report they pull, and it's called CASPER. For our DHHS, our health survey, we have no repeat deficiencies, which is fantastic. So they check a box and they can move on. Life safety code, we have 4 repeat deficiencies, and you can see all of the years that we've gotten those deficiencies. So it would really behoove us to make sure that there's nothing blocking corridor doors from shutting, that our oxygen storage is locked, and we have a signage, that we're doing the proper fire alarm testing, and that we don't have anything blocking exit doors. I know, like on Station 5, some of our residents like to pull out chairs and sit by those exits. Well, when she's here, They can't do that. I probably shouldn't have said that on camera. Anyway, get them moved. Once they arrive, well, and also before they get here, you need to know that they will pre-select 70% of their sample. Because we are the largest skilled facility, we know that there will be 35 residents in their sample. We already know that, we can plan on that. They're gonna look, and they're gonna interview, and they're gonna watch every moment of the day, 35 of our residents. Good, we know that. 70% of that 35 is gonna be pre-selected based on the MDS assessments that we complete. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but they'll have 70% of that sample already done before they walk in the door, no matter what they find once they walk in the door. So, immediately upon their entrance, and here's some things that have confused people in the past, especially that Sunday night arrival. They're gonna ask for a completed matrix of new admissions over the last 30 days. We use a software system called Matrix. What they are calling Matrix is like a spreadsheet. That's their matrix. So sometimes they're like, what do you want from Matrix? You know, that's not their matrix. They're talking about their own matrix. But they need a list of all new admissions. They want to know how many people are in-house. They want to know how many smoke and what are our designated smoking times. They're doing that because they want to see if we've done a smoking assessment on all of the residents that smoke. Are they safe smokers or not? They want to know who the resident council president is. They want to know what we would do for emergency water. And then they want our floor plan. That's immediately. No questions asked. Doesn't care if they come in the middle of the night. We have to have that stuff ready. And then when they arrive, they no longer do a tour of the building. We'll probably get 5 surveyors, and they will immediately go to the 5 stations, and they will start doing interviews. They also used to always ask us who was interviewable. They don't do that anymore. They decide for themselves who's interviewable, which sometimes can be entertaining. But otherwise, you know, they'll go interview. For each station, they're gonna probably have about 8 residents per station. Generally, typically, they avoid station 3 because they like to have the same residents here for the first day of their survey, and they're still here on the last day of their survey. And station 3 has so much in and out that we won't see the same volume of residents on station 3 as we do on stations, the other stations. So it may be a little varied, but it's about 8. They'll interview them, and then they'll start doing observations on them. So, and then they'll take and they'll make sure they have their 35 residents, and then they're gonna do a real quick closed record review, and then some other facility tasks. But the federal government has said to them, don't spend a lot of time digging through charts. We want you out there observing residents. We want you out there observing staff. See what their days are like. So they will meet briefly with me. We will fill out some additional information. One of them will immediately go to the kitchen to see what's going on in the kitchen. Is food not being prepped appropriately? Are there outdates in the walk-ins? Are hairnets not being worn? So they will go to the kitchen, but then they will go to their assigned areas. So who's in their initial pool of residents? Generally, it's going to be some of those people from that new admission list. About 8 of those residents are going to be offsite selected, but the majority of them are going to be what they call vulnerable residents. So in addition to the new residents, or anyone that we have sent in a self-report on, because those are easy residents to pick, they're going to be those residents that are vulnerable. So here's who's vulnerable. Residents that are high risk of cares, people that have wounds, people that are on isolation, people that are receiving tube feedings, people that have IVs, some of those higher risk residents, people that are on a lot of antipsychotics or hypnotics are going to be people that they immediately gravitate towards. They will do interviews. Each interview is going to take about 20 minutes in length. They're asked to screen every resident. They generally don't screen every resident. But they're going to ask them everything from their rights to quality of life to quality of care. In fact, they're required to cover quality of life things, residents' rights, and quality of care. We know the questions they're going to ask them, so we ask the residents the same questions. We need to know what our residents are how they're going to answer so that we can go ahead and get ahead of that. So What they're gonna do when they ask them a question is, they're gonna say, do you have a problem with your roommate? If the resident says yes, they're gonna say, okay, did the facility address that with you? If they say, oh yeah, I have a new roommate now. Okay, great, check a box, they're done. If they say, no, they just ignored me, they don't care that this guy's up all night screaming, then they're gonna further investigate it. Then we know they're gonna ask that question of every other resident they interview. If they say, have you lost any weight? Yes. Did they do anything about it? Yes. Now I have to drink these shakes 3 times a day. They check a box, they move on. So they won't take every single issue a resident gives them and say, oh, you know, sky's falling. But if it starts to become a trend, then they're gonna look at those things. And I'm sorry, I'm not reading everything on the slide because I figure you guys can read. They also are required to do interviews with family members for those non-interviewable residents that are already in their sample or that they choose to have in their sample. They come in, they're doing their observations, they see a resident sitting there at the dining room not eating and not being assisted. They're gonna probably add them to their sample. They come in, they see a resident leaning in their wheelchair with no adaptive equipment to have them sit upright. Probably gonna add them to their sample. They come in, they see a resident totally disheveled, hair's not combed, socks don't match, not even wearing socks. Probably gonna add them to their sample. So if they're not interviewable, then they're gonna interview the family. Again, CMS asks them to do those interviews on day 1 if possible, because then that helps them kind of form an opinion of the general culture of the facility. But they do have until the end of survey to do it. And their only real requirement is that they interview at least 3 family members. They will do like I said, a limited record review. You know, they don't spend a lot of time in charts anymore, but they just want to confirm what they're already seeing. They will look, though, for pressure ulcers, infections, and any elopements that have happened. And they are for sure going to look for anyone that's on insulin, anticoagulants, or antipsychotics with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, or any residents that have had a PASSAR level 2 screen. And PASSAR screens have become a big hot button for them this year. So we're taking a look at our PASSAR screens because wouldn't that be a smart thing to do? They are required to observe a first full meal. So if they get here at 9:15 and they're not able to observe the entire breakfast from start to finish, then we know they're going to be observing lunch on all stations. If everything goes great on that station, they're not going to observe any more dining rooms. So we know that if they're back for supper or they're back for breakfast, then something must not have gone well. So we're going to try to provide some additional leadership support to the dining rooms, because the dining room is a monster of a moving part. You got a lot of, I've always said in my 31 years of doing this, the 2 things we have to do better than anything else is food and beautician. If we can do food and beautician solid, then we're golden with our residents. So food is a big deal. It's what residents look forward to. It's a socialization. So food needs to go well. So they have to observe the first full meal. They're going to cover all dining rooms, including room trays. And they're going to focus the majority of their attention on dependent residents, those that need assistance from us to eat. They're also going to look for unnecessary medications. All psychotropics are going to be looked at: insulins, anticoagulants, opioids, diuretics, antibiotics, as well as any adverse consequences, including those residents that have had a high number of falls, weight loss, or they look sedated while they're here. They're going to presume that we have over-medicated them, and so they're going to do an unnecessary medication review for any of those residents that they observe in any of those areas. And then, of course, they're going to look at infection control. It's the #1 cited deficiency. In addition to washing your hands, they're also going to make sure, they're going to take 5 residents and make sure that they receive their flu vaccine and pneumonia vaccines. And if they didn't, why didn't they? We have a lower than state and national average of people that we have documented that have received the flu. I think we're at 93% and state average is like 96%. So we're going to be taking a look at that in more depth. They're also going to review with Ashley our antibiotic stewardship program. Do we have people on antibiotics longer than they need to be? Are we putting them on without good enough reason to be? And then any transmission-based precautions. If there's a red bag hanging on that resident's room, is every single person following the precautions? Housekeeping, social service, activities, nursing, dietary, anyone that enters that room has to abide by those precautions. And is that happening? You know, also things like wiping down glucometers and all that kind of stuff, all that equipment. Infection control is just mammoth in the survey. And then they do this, all of our residents who we've discharged off of their Medicare aid benefits, they're gonna make sure that we gave them adequate notification that they were being discharged off of their benefits. The federal government gives them Medicare benefits to use, and so if we as a facility decide that they're no longer getting a benefit from it, we have to give them proper notice before we just say, nah, you can't use that benefit anymore. And if we don't, then it's gonna be a problem. So they're gonna ask us, especially from everyone that's discharged off of Medicare aid benefits, they're gonna ask for 3 residents, and they're gonna make sure that those benefits are in their chart, that those notices are in their chart. Okay, so medication administration and storage. They are required to observe 25 medication opportunities. Different routes, different shifts, different staff. So you may think you're being picked on, but they have to check that box. And so if you're on station 2 and that's the only resident that gets their meds through a tube, that they're gonna watch you do it. There's just no way of getting around it. So don't run for them. And then when there's any sort of narcotic given, they're immediately going to make sure that that narcotic sheet is reconciled. That we don't have any missing narcotics. Those are the 2 big things they're looking at when they do their medication reviews. And that medications are not expired. They will also meet with our resident council. We love when they meet with our resident council, so that's always just a wild card. They can ask the resident council anything they want, and the resident council can tell them anything they want. Thus why we now have cushions outside for the smokers. No, they are required to ask them about abuse and about staffing patterns. Do your call lights get answered timely? And have you ever witnessed abuse or been abused? Those 2 things they have to ask the resident council. Everything else is just open for whatever they want to talk about. So that will happen. We all breathe a sigh of relief in that time. During observations of cares, they're going to be looking at specific things. And we know what they are. So we're looking at those things too. Do staff knock on doors before they enter? It's not the knock enter, it's the knock, ask permission, and enter. That's their home. That's their space. That's all they have. Get their permission before you go into their room. And are we pulling curtains before we do procedures? We're not performing any procedure outside of a room. And yeah, that includes things in the dining room. Giving someone their eye drops in the dining room, if we haven't gotten that resident's permission and their table mate's permission to do that, that will be a deficiency, for a privacy deficiency. Like going up and stabbing someone in the back of the arm with whatever that is that you're stabbing them with, that's a dignity issue. You know, nobody goes to a restaurant and sees that going on. So why are we doing that during meal service? Call lights are within reach and answered promptly. Residents are positioned appropriately, their grooming is appropriate, and they're unrestrained. If a resident has a lap buddy, but they don't know how to unlap it or unlock it, a seat belt, but they don't know how to unlock it, then that's a restraint. So we have to be checking that thing periodically. So the environment, they're also going to be looking at the environment. They're going to be doing water temps, making sure lighting is adequate, our maintenance and upkeep, and the overall cleanliness of the building. For whatever 35 residents they pick, those will be the same 35 rooms that they look at. So every morning we add to the list and we give that out to everyone so that everyone can know who's on their list. We give it to housekeeping, we give it to laundry, we give it to everybody so that everyone knows. When you're delivering a room tray today, that person's on their list. It's just, we try to be as transparent as we can with the team so that the team can do well while they're here. Food, dietary, they have to watch a meal prep from the time you take something out of the walk-in cooler to the time it is eaten by a resident. So when they say I need to watch therapeutic meal prep of a pureed meal, that means that you don't start until they get down there. Don't pull the chicken out of the freezer until they get down there. If you do, then they can't check their box. So that just means they have to go back down to the kitchen again tomorrow. It slows them up, it makes them mad, and now they're in a really foul mood when they're back tomorrow to watch it again. So when they say they need to watch meal prep, that means we don't start meal prep till they're there to watch us do meal prep. Don't try to fool them, they won't be fooled. They will do their own food temps, and they will make sure that all of our food temp logs are complete. Every single one, every single station, every single meal. Can't have any holes in food temps. And then they're going to do, they're going to do dining room observations and then staff interaction. Are staff visiting with the residents, or are they just visiting with each other? Are they talking about a Friday night party they went to? Or are they talking to the resident about an activity they just attended? They're going to be watching for those kinds of things. And then, of course, any triggered areas, like any complaints they get during the interviews, any weight loss for a resident that's greater than 5%. Those therapeutic diets, they love watching people on pureed diets because generally those meals aren't as attractive looking, so they want to make sure that they're actually consuming them. And then any pressure sore interventions. Are our RDs involved in wound management and wound healing? And then infection control, it's the most common and the easiest to cite, but really what they're looking at with infection control are two things: staff hand washing and how they handle, store, and process and transport linen. You cannot hold linen up against your dirty uniform. You are dirty. The linen is clean. It has to be transported away from your uniform. It has to be transported up from the laundry department covered. Otherwise, it's now dirty. So that's what they're mostly looking for. The other thing they love to watch is one CNA. Kind of touch her hair, go over, touch a plate, then go over, rub her nose. I mean, just innocent things that you think that you do every day. They love to record that. And then she did this, and then she rubbed her eye, and then she patted her coworker on the back, asked them if they were having a good day, and then she helped a resident cut their food. So, don't be that person. Don't be Dave. Isn't there a commercial about don't be Dave? Don't be Dave. So what do the surveyors want from us? We already know what they want. They want us to be organized and efficient with their requests for information. They want us to have accurate information. Don't ever tell them anything that you do not know to be fact. They may ask you a question because you're standing there, but if you're not supposed to know that information from a HIPAA perspective, or better yet, you don't know the answer, don't make something up. Don't make it up. Refer them to your supervisor, refer them to me, or tell them, I'll go find that answer and be right back to you. But don't start having diarrhea of the mouth, because they're writing down everything you say. We purposefully target certain individuals who make all of their copies for them. Kim makes all of their copies. 15 people don't make their copies, because at the end of the day, we want to know what information they have from us. So any request for copies goes through Kim, period. No one else makes copies, except for Kim. And then they want us to be professional. Don't be sarcastic. I know I've used this example before, but for people that are new, not here, but I was once with a fire marshal during life safety code survey, and she's required to ask so many staff members, what would you do in case of a fire? And one of them said, I'd run like hell. Well, we got a deficiency because our staff weren't educated on what to do in case of a fire. Now, they were trying to be funny, but guess what? They're not funny. You can be cordial with our surveyors. Of course, we want you to be. We want you to be professional with them, but they're not looking for a comedic act from anybody. I mean, they have a job to do. We have a job to do. Don't try to be slapstick with them. It just won't go over well. And then you'll be quoted for the whole world to see what you said. So just be kind of cautious about how funny we decide to be, myself included. So I love this quote from Paul Battledon. He says, every system is perfectly designed to achieve exactly the results it gets. We know exactly what they're going to do when they're here. So we should already know what to expect. And we've often said, we have a highly skilled team here. And I don't say that just to fluff your feathers. I mean it. We have a highly skilled group of people in this organization who know what they're doing. And we've often said, because of that, we could write their deficiencies for them. We know where our problems are. We hope they don't find them, but we know what our problems are. So if we already know what our problems are, then let's start working on them. let's ourselves start working on them. Nothing a surveyor says to me should ever be a shock. We should already know it. Yeah. Darn it, you found that. But we should be working on it ourselves. Nothing a resident says to a surveyor should be a shock to us. We should already know about that resident's concern or grievance or problem and be working on it. Nothing should be a surprise to us. Because if it's not a surprise to us, we're going to get pretty good results. Because we're going to be able to show them, yeah, we're aware of that, and here's what we're doing about it. Okay? They can check their box. Oh, sorry. So what are we going to do to prepare for it? They do resident interviews. We do resident interviews. They do resident observations. We do observations. That's why we've been observing Station 2 dining room for the last 2 years. We needed to get it better, and we're working on getting it better. They do family interviews, we interview family. They do staff interviews, we give the staff the exact questions they're gonna ask you. And they only interview the professional nurses. They look at our census records, and so we look at that. And then they do an admission record review, so do we. Or Kim does, not we. How else are we gonna prepare? We will also look at any demand bills. We'll do dining room observations. We'll watch infection control practices. That's why we, from time to time, do those hand washing audits. I don't know if you've ever been subjected to those, but I'm gonna wash your hands, and you're gonna wash me, wash my hands. Try to say that while you're doing an in-service. We're gonna do kitchen and food service observations. The dietary food service team does them every month. We're gonna watch medication administration. Pharmacy, our pharmacist is here every month to do pharmacy reviews. And then we're gonna make sure that staff know what to do in case of abuse. What would you do if you saw a resident-to-resident altercation?
Separate them first.
Separate, intervene, that's all they wanna hear. Too many people say, I'd tell my supervisor. You can tell your supervisor all day, but please intervene first. They want to hear you say that, and then they check their box. So most importantly, we're gonna hang together on this. It just seems like every year they're here, whatever reason, they seem to target one particular staff member, and everybody else, breathes a sigh of relief and says, oh good, better them than me. But really what we need to do is support each other. If they're beating up the housekeeping team, let's support the housekeeping team. If they're beating up food service on Station 4, let's get up there and support food service staff. Let's hang together on this. So, the other thing that I want to do, and I've done this the last couple of years, and I appreciate your involvement with this, is we do interview our residents routinely on the same questions that they ask, and it's about a 4-page interview that they do. We feel like sometimes our residents will give other team members different responses than they'll give to me, or they'll give to Jen Graff. So every year at this in-service, we have this really shortened survey, I think it's like 10 questions, that we ask all of you to go do with one resident. Yeah, there's about 10 questions. So, and these are interviewable residents. So the last part of this interview, I'm gonna give each of you an interview to go ask a resident these questions, and then just bring it back here to me. What I would ask though is that if they answer in the negative, if you could just make a little note. So for instance, are you offered choices for meals and snacks? If they say no, say, is there a particular meal that you're not offered a choice? Or is your bathing schedule followed? If they say no, say, why not? Just ask them a little follow-up on that. And then overall, how do you rate the staff? And overall, how do you rate the care you receive? So it should go pretty quickly. Just write down what they say. Write down almost exactly what they say if you could. Because if there's negatives, we want to follow up with them. If they're not there, or they're busy, or they're in therapy, then come back, I'll give you a new one. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Are there any questions about state survey that I didn't, that you've heard rumors about, or? Yes, I walk through the building about every 5 minutes. I just do that because I'm nervous, so just ignore me. I'm not looking to see what you're doing. Just let me go. Anything that you say, oh, I heard they do this, or I heard they do that. Anything that I didn't cover? Okay. All right, so, and I have some pens if you don't have a pen on you. So, I'll dismiss you to go find your people, and then if you just bring them back, it shouldn't take you more than about 5 minutes. And don't moan and groan about who I give you. Stand in a minute.
I'm gonna go check on Cree real quick.